Lisa was born and raised near Wingham in Huron County, but calls Bruce County home as she lives near Teeswater on a farm that has been in her husband's family for 119 years. Lisa is a graduate of the University of Guelph and is a proud alumnus of Class 6 of the Advanced Agricultural Leadership Program in the George Morris Executive Leadership Program. Lisa has a long history of being active and an engaged citizen, working with many community and agricultural organizations. She has served as Ontario 4-H Foundation Chair of the Board and as Vice Chair of the Ontario Agri-Food Education, Inc. So welcome, Minister Thompson. Thank you very much for taking time out of your extremely busy agenda to share with the residents of Brockton. We also have, we're also honored to have Associate Minister Prabmeet Sarkaria, MPP, Brampton South. Prab has the honor of representing his community as the member of Provincial Parliament for Brampton South and serving the people of Ontario as the Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction. Passionate about community, Prab is an active volunteer. He served on the City of Brampton's Property Standards Committee, as well as the Board of Directors for Hockey, for Humanity, and Karma Grow. He is an avid sports fan who enjoys playing and watching hockey, basketball, baseball, and football. If you ever have the opportunity to visit his office, it is impossible to forget who won the 2019 basketball championship. Prab entered public service in order to be a strong advocate for hardworking families in Brampton South and all across the province he loves. He is committed to giving voice to the concerns of everyday people and is humbled to serve. So welcome to our forum in Huron-Bruce, Prab. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Very good.
Okay, so right now, just before we move into the presentation, ministers, I'll just have our BIA president, Randy Saunders, give a few words of welcome to our small business community.
Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome everybody to this Zoom meeting. It's my actual first Zoom meeting, so bear with me on how this is all done. I've got a couple of monitors, so I'm trying to figure out which one to look at. You know, in these uncertain times, we're very welcome to have the help of all of the different levels of government to drive us along into recovery. I think it's if we all work together, this is going to be yeah, it's going to be good. And we appreciate Lisa Thompson coming and being on here with us, and Chris and Paulette, everybody here to help us to gain a recovery to this. So again, welcome. And if you have any questions, I'll definitely get in and get your questions answered. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So now we will move on to remarks from the ministers. So Minister Thompson, would you like to start?
Okay, certainly, Mayor. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to have my friend and colleague, Prab Sarkaria, join us today for the Municipality of Brockton Town Hall, specifically around COVID recovery. But first of all, I'd be remiss, let's be real, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that this past weekend was the 20th anniversary of the water tragedy. But I sincerely believe with all of my heart that Walkerton and the Municipality of Brockton leads by example when it comes to your sense of community and collective commitment to work your way through a crisis. And here we are today, facing COVID-19 head on. And, you know, that's what brought us together today for this town hall. And I genuinely believe that this is one of my first town halls with small town Ontario. I wanted to start at home. And I really think we can learn from all of you on the call and afterwards with the survey and submissions that you share with us, because in order to recover from COVID-19, we need to hear firsthand from all communities, how do we move forward together? And that's why I'm so pleased to have Minister Prab Sarkaria join us today. As Minister of Small Business, I join him on the Jobs and Recovery Committee that's chaired by our Finance Minister, Mr. Rod Phillips. And I look forward to hearing from you. I think I'm going to leave my remarks at that. but trust that we have been working for the last 10 weeks diligently, all levels of government. We've rolled up our sleeves and we're working together to make sure that we can move forward in such a manner that we can maintain and most importantly grow our main streets across Ontario. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Minister Thompson. All right, Associate Minister Prab, would you like to add some remarks, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Peabody and Paulette for helping set this up. And I want to echo your comments at the start. Minister Thompson is definitely one of the hardest working members and ministers at Queen's Park. There is never a meeting or caucus meeting or cabinet meeting where she isn't fiercely advocating for her community and for the region. And that's why it's a really great honor to join Minister Thompson in this opportunity to have this discussion with all of you and for her to bringing us all together in this discussion. I think, we can really look at the impacts of COVID-19 and the dramatic impact it's had economically on all of us. No one could have predicted a couple of months ago what the type of situation that we're in today. And I think, it's very important for us as a government to ensure that our lines of communications between whether it's rural Ontario, urban Ontario, are kept open. Now more than ever is the need for us to engage our stakeholders, our communities across the province to ensure that we have the necessary information to guide us in our decision making as we move forward. And I think we've already seen the economic impacts of COVID-19 that it's had on our communities, specifically our small businesses. There have been various sectors that have been impacted differently with COVID-19, whether we want to talk about agriculture, whether we want to talk about the retail sector, whether we want to talk about even consumer confidence or business confidence. So there have been significant impacts to each of those areas as a result of COVID-19. Now, as you know, our government initially launched a $17 billion package at the start of the COVID pandemic, because at that time we really didn't know what we were up against. There was a lot of uncertainty at that time in terms of how long will this last, how will we be able to contain it. I think the one underlying, silver lining in a lot of this is we as a country, as a province, specifically Ontario, has now trended towards a best case scenario. So we are now, as we saw this week, in the phase one of opening our economy. But I think it's important for us to now, as we look towards the future, as we look towards the next phases, and not just helping businesses weather the storm, but how we're going to come out of this even stronger, is going to be a key and critical part to forming the future policies that this government works on. Myself and Minister Thompson have the ability to, and the honor of serving on the Jobs and Recovery Committee, which is tasked with doing exactly that, is bringing forward proposals that will help Ontario businesses get back on their feet. And that's what we really want to hear today is, as we look to the future, we all recognize that there are a limited amount of resources that the government could deploy. But in order to do that effectively, efficiently, those resources, those programs that we put out, what we need, how we should do it, should be derived from the businesses like those representing and on this call today. And that's what we're really interested in hearing and listening to all of you about, is where are the impacts, where are the future opportunities, and where can the government come in and support the economic recovery as we get past COVID-19. So I want to keep my comments fairly short as well, and I really want to focus on the opportunity to hear from the businesses directly to help us get through this.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move into the next portion of our meeting, the question and answer, and that will be moderated by our clerk, Fiona Hamilton.
Thank you very much. There's still some people signing in. If you do have a question now, please look at the question and answer, the little chat bubble that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and you can type in questions to the ministers. We do have a few that I can start the ball rolling here with that came in previously, and one of them I'll start with to either ministers. What provisions are being made for childcare so that employees can return to work?
Okay, well, first of all, I'll throw a couple of statements out there and ideas in terms of how we're moving forward, and then Prab, feel free to jump in as well. But I want to share with everyone on the call, I don't know whether you've noticed local news coverage or not, but Walkerton is a very important community and, you know, the hub of the municipality of Brockton. I'm really pleased to share with you, if you haven't heard already, that we're investing $1.6 million in additional daycare spaces at Mother Teresa. And these are spaces that will be available as of this fall. So that's something to look forward to. But immediately right now, we know in order to get people back to work, they need to also be considering what are they going to do for daycare. And so, as announced yesterday, Minister Lecce, along with Premier Ford, announced that we are taking a look at daycare opening up during phase 2, if you will. There's emergency daycare spaces open already, and they opened under very robust protocols that obviously absolutely ensure the safety of our children and our staff. And we're going to be looking at implementing those very same protocols in a thorough way as we look to open up daycare across the province in stage 2. Another thing I want to share with you, recognizing that officially yesterday, Minister Lecce and Premier Ford shared that students will not be returning to school in the month of June. And so also included in our announcement yesterday, we noted that we are going to be carefully moving forward with day camps. Overnight camps, unfortunately, this summer will not be allowed, but we're following the advice and the directives of our Provincial Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Williams, and he feels that day camps can be provided. And we certainly are going to be supporting all of our day camps so that parents can be confident when they send their kids to day camps as well. Over and above that, there will be an option for expanded learning for parents to consider for their children as well during the summer. So we are moving carefully, thoughtfully, and safely forward in terms of opening up daycare, because I've heard it from employers, not only in the municipality of Brockton, but throughout the riding and across Ontario, that in order to confidently go back to work, we need to ensure that our children have a safe place to go to as well. Prab, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think, Minister, you covered a lot of,
My apologies. You covered a lot of the key points there, and I think that's critical to getting the economy back on track, is making sure that we have the access to daycare. We have the labor force supply that's available to fill a lot of the jobs. We're hearing that quite a bit, is whether in our food production, retail, there has been an issue getting employees to get to work. And we need to make sure that we're helping parents have that, whether it's daycare and in that phased approach in a very safe manner, so we're not risking anything. And so far to date, whether we're looking at our the healthcare that's been, the daycare that's been provided for our frontline healthcare, we've been able to do a pretty good job of keeping that fairly safe. So I think that's Minister Thompson, you hit on all the great points there, and I think, as we move forward into phase 2 and 3, this becomes more and more important.
Thank you.
Back to you, Paulette.
Okay. I'm a business that doesn't feel comfortable opening yet, even though I'm allowed to. Is there any requirement for me to open? That's one question.
Prab, how about you answer that first as
Sure.
Minister of Small Business?
I'd love to. And the answer to that is no. And we want to make sure that businesses, are comfortable We've put out about 90 guiding documents online from the Ministry of Labor. Minister McNaughton has put those up as to what the best practice should be as we kind of move forward. But the government has also, and Minister Thompson actually has played a key role in this, is getting the business portal up and running, which is linking businesses that need to open with suppliers of PPE. And I think, a lot of times consumers are also looking for businesses to have the proper protocols in place so that when they do visit, they feel safe. And so under no circumstance are businesses required to open. We saw even when we initially launched our the essential services list, there was a lot of businesses, especially in the auto sector, that weren't required to shut down, but they shut down on their own. And there's some market forces that will dictate who shuts down and who doesn't because of the decreased demand. But there will not be anything that says you must be open. If a business only wants to open up twice a week now because of they feel uncomfortable operating 7 days a week, that's completely up to them. But as a government, we want to make sure whether it's PPE, they have the access to the suppliers, who's making it in Canada, etc. That's all going to be provided for them, and we want to help them support and facilitating that and build up that consumer and business confidence.
Well said, Prab. I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. And on the topic of PPE, one business was asking if there could be any support for the additional costs that they'll be facing having to order masks and extra sanitizer and things like that.
Yeah, I would suggest that it's certainly something that we're taking very seriously. As Prab had mentioned, Minister Sarkaria had mentioned, my Ministry of Government and Consumer Services is responsible for the PPE on the non-health sector side of the business. And we have set up the B2B so that businesses can connect directly with suppliers to help them out. In terms of recovery, this is what we need to hear from you. In terms of our role on Minister Phillips's Jobs and Recovery Committee, Prab and I need to hear what is it that's going to enable you to confidently open up and recover from COVID-19. So this is something we certainly, that ask today is certainly something we can take back to the committee and note that businesses are wondering, what supports are in it for them. And I can tell you that on many different levels of our government, we're working very closely with BIAs across the province, as well as chambers of commerce as well, to identify what is it that people need to return to work confidently. So I thank you for that question, and certainly we will take it back to our committee and follow up with an answer for you.
Thank you. Here's another one. How can I assure my customers that my business is safe? Some are telling me that they're nervous to come in.
One of the things that we really want to try to help, and I think this is going to be one of the significant hurdles, I think, in getting back on track economically, is the confidence element. And from our perspective, I think Minister McNaughton has done a great job at the Ministry of Labor of putting about 90 of these guidelines together about, whether you're in the hospitality industry, whether you're in the retail industry, whether you're an auto dealer, etc. A concerted effort at trying to ensure that there's a baseline of minimum that businesses should do with consultation from medical expert advice. And that medical expert advice is kind of working with our businesses to see how we can have those protocols in place. So that would be, for example, making sure that we don't have more than an X number of individuals inside a shop at a certain time, where physical distancing and social distancing is not possible. Making sure that, which we've been seeing in some stores already, lineups that occur outside, having X's marked on the pavement in terms of the lineups. But then also we've seen some retailers and retail stores also, you know, install plexiglass at the retail cash counters to kind of give some more security and distance between some of their employees. So I think that's, you know, we're trying to see the businesses kind of take their own initiative as well. But this is going to be something that we really struggle with in the post-COVID world. You know, we have to recognize that the pre-COVID era, if we want to call it that, there are going to be significant differences in the future. And if we want to get up and running again, get our economy going again, we're going to have to do it in a structured and a phased approach. And it's not going to be the same as before, because we want to keep everybody safe and healthy. But we gotta get the economy going again. And I think this is a healthy medium between doing that, is putting in some of these best practices. And we've been seeing other jurisdictions do that as well. So I think that's a very good question, and how we kind of get through that and how we handle it is going to be very important.
Thank you so much, Prab. And just to add to that, from our local riding perspective, I have just been so impressed with how businesses have quickly stood up online opportunities for customers as well. And I hope we don't lose that. We need to draw people to our main streets, but the pickup at curbside has really been effective, from bookstores to clothing stores, shoe stores. It's amazing what they're promoting on Facebook. And then by appointment, people are making arrangements. They pay online and then they make arrangements to pick things up. I think going forward, the smart business people will identify how they can blend that online opportunity with that physical experience as well. I hope we don't lose that.
Thank you. We have a question here from Don Moore. Our local Victoria Jubilee Hall in downtown Walkerton has not been able to have any live performances since COVID-19 has closed down this kind of venue. When do you anticipate that such venues will be able to have live performances?
Well, Dawn, I really appreciate that question. And I'm going to be honest, I always have been honest. And I think large gatherings, the timeline for large gatherings is out there on the horizon. Again, we have to have confidence, and we have to make sure that we follow the directives and the expertise by our public health officials. Both locally, Dr. Era is just phenomenal as our local medical officer of health, as well as Dr. Williams at the provincial level. But I can tell, Prab was supposed to come to our riding in the wintertime, but of course, weather had other ideas, so unfortunately he couldn't make it. But Prab, when you come into the riding, I want you to come to Jubilee Hall. It's absolutely gorgeous. The sound effects, everything is original and pristine, and we can't use that hall enough. And Dawn, I trust there's an organization that's a not-for-profit affiliated with Jubilee Hall, and I can tell you that at the very end of our Jobs and Recovery Committee call last Friday morning, I did bring up not-for-profits, because again, that's how we roll in rural Ontario, right? From our ag societies, like the Walkerton Ag Society, through to 4-H, you know, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, etc. I'm actually worried about our not-for-profits. And so he, being Minister Phillips, pleasantly surprised me, because he's been thinking about that as well. And when there's different examples. For instance, when Fort McMurray in Alberta was wiped out by the fires, the federal government put in a program whereby they would match any donation to help with not-for-profits and to help that town recover. And so we're entertaining, how do we support our not-for-profit organizations and make sure those gems in our small towns do not get impacted in a huge way by COVID-19. We've got to find a way to make sure the Jubilee Halls across Ontario find a way to recover and bounce back and be better than ever. So that's on our radar. We're figuring that out.
And that's probably been one of the toughest things from COVID. It has been how it's taken us away from all of these very special places, whether it's gathering with friends and families and we kind of listen to the live concerts. I think that's been one of the toughest parts of COVID and that isolation that it brings with it. But I think, and just like Minister Thompson said, we've got to find a way to support these very important institutions and organizations, and it's good to hear that the members really care about it, and we'll definitely take that back as more reassurance that what we've been discussing is something that's front of mind for many of you as well.
Thank you. A related question is that, we also have on the panel as participants some day camps, hotels, spas, salons, gyms that offer contact sports. All of these have been very hard hit along with everybody else. But when do you forecast light at the end of the tunnel for them, and what's being done to ensure that they survive over a period of what could be months with little to no revenue?
Totally respect the situation that they've been placed in, and we talk about that particular line of work on a regular basis. And looking ahead to stage 2, you'll see some personal services come back again if they follow the guidelines that have been defined by our Minister of Labour, Monty McNaughton, and as well as the directives from Public Health. We know that these services are equally important. I think everybody has longer hair over the last 10 weeks or so. So we're all looking forward to trying to get back. And it's something that we're considering. And again, it'll be really interesting to see how COVID-19 has been transmitted over this past holiday weekend. And if the numbers are in our favor, I think you'll see very serious consideration in terms of the timing of stage 2 and stage 3. But we have moved very, very thoughtfully forward. And Prab, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, and I think it breaks our hearts when we have to hear all these stories about small businesses being impacted like this and what COVID's done to them. But I think what just like Minister Thompson is saying, the next approach of it, we might not be able to guarantee you that everything will be exactly as it was pre-COVID, but we're going to work with whether it's hair salons, barbers, to find a compromise with both working with our health officials. Maybe it's a system or a structure that's doesn't say, maybe before you could have 5 people in your shop. Maybe now you can only have 1 or 2 by appointment only. But there's light at the end of the tunnel when we have those discussions, those opportunities to engage our health officials and really make the case for some of our small businesses and how they need to be back up on their feet and how even people need to see that back up. Because there is a psychological impact to that as well, and to making sure that we're back up and running. And so I think that's going to be a very important consideration. And now more than ever, we've seen the government, whether it was moved from curbside to delivery to having retail open. These are the exact type of the conversations that we want to have with our businesses and find those solutions and opportunities to get those businesses back up and running when we look towards phase 2 and phase 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to close off there, I want to share with everyone that it's really heartening. The plans that are coming forward in terms of initiatives that business owners are demonstrating locally, they're considering the directives from Public Health. They're considering the directives from the Minister of Labour. And the plans that I'm receiving are just amazing. And I'm feeding them in as well to the Jobs and Recovery Committee, demonstrating that our businesses across Huron-Bruce as well as across Ontario are taking this very seriously. And there's some very good ideas percolating from the street level up as well. And so, we certainly welcome everybody's thoughtfulness in terms of how we can get those gyms going again and how we can confidently move forward with day camps. I've been really impressed with what's been submitted to me from a local perspective.
Thank you. Talking about, life after COVID will be different for local businesses. We all know that. One of the concerns that we've gotten is, as you pointed out earlier, there's been a surge in online shopping, online sales. that's been great because a lot of our businesses have learned to pivot into that sphere. But also a lot of them are concerned that they cannot compete still with some of the huge online players of the world that don't necessarily have the overhead costs, etc. And that the new normal with consumers being more comfortable with the online sphere could also make it difficult for them to balance both having a storefront and online in a cost-effective way. Can you respond to that?
Well, my local experience thus far over the last 10 weeks, I am, again, buoyed by the sense of community commitment and pride that people are talking that this has been a wake-up call for them. And you know what? They may think twice before jumping in the car and driving to Owen Sound or driving to Kitchener-Waterloo to maybe go to 1 or 2 stores when they can get it right here in our own backyard. And I think that you're going to see from all 3 levels of government a real push. And I know there's, I made note that you, Paulette, you have somebody on from tourism, OMAFRA, the county economic developments, department. We're going to do our very best to encourage people to take that community pride and make sure that we are taking what resources we have and using them locally. And Prab, you might smile when I say this, but when I say I shop local, I have favorite spots in every town in this riding that we make sure we go to. And even on Takeout Wednesdays, you know, that carries over to Thursday, Friday sometimes. And we have a little circuit that my husband and I like to deal with. And we all have to do our part. And I think people are mindful that, you know what, when it comes to small business in small town Ontario, it's the small businesses that will be out there supporting our sports teams. It's the small businesses that will be donating or contributing to a production at Jubilee Hall. And because of that, I'm hearing more and more than ever, that people are cognizant of that. And in return, we have to make sure that we help business in small town Ontario recover from COVID-19 as well. Prab, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think buy local campaigns, driving more traffic towards our local small businesses and our communities, that's going to be critical for us. And helping them get online is one part of it. And we're currently looking at some ideas around how do we kind of help take some of our businesses to the next level through that online presence. We've got some great Canadian success stories. I always look at a company like Shopify that helps small businesses in small communities build an online presence through a website so they get access to international markets. We've got tools like maybe Amazon or eBay, which allow you to sell local goods to markets across the province, in the country, and international markets. So I think there's a lot of discussion and a lot of work that needs to be done from also the government side and engaging more private sector to be able to help support those local businesses to give them even more of an edge. And I 100% agree with you that there is a disadvantage to some of our smaller businesses, and we want to make sure that we equalize the playing field. And if there's programs for the government to run, those are considerations that we want to hear about, and how we can kind of better support their online presence is going to be very helpful for us. So I think, one of the biggest the areas for us to improve upon, just looking at the numbers, is helping those businesses build those more competitive online presences. And I think that's done by engaging small businesses in small communities and seeing how we can expand their markets across the province. And so there's some really unique programs that we're working on. But I also think underlying that is making sure that businesses have access to reliable internet, and that's something I know that Minister Thompson and a lot of other ministers that represent rural communities are really pushing forward with. And now more than ever, we know how important it is with COVID.
Yeah, and just to close off that topic, recognizing that RTO 7 is on the line, OMAFRA and County Economic Development people, I also think there's an opportunity for all of us to find a way to work together to drive the tourism to be local and to drive business into those small towns and onto our main streets. And so this is something that I want to be talking. Just so everybody knows on the line, every week, the local wardens from Bruce, Grey, Huron, and Perth, and the corresponding members of Parliament, as well as MPPs, as well as the medical officers of health for both Huron-Perth and Grey Bruce, we get together for a touch point every week. And we're very mindful of a couple of things. First of all, how are we going to work together to attract people to our main streets? And we have some ideas percolating there. And the other thing is, you know what? We have a premier, and this makes me so proud. We have a premier that says, never again is Ontario going to be dependent on other jurisdictions when it comes to the production of PPE and other essential products to help a province through a crisis and or to help other provinces during their times of need. And so we're also thinking of how can we attract business to this area as well. And we're mindful of attracting people to our main streets to shop. But I also want to share with you, we're trying to take time to address the need to stand up more businesses so that Ontario truly can be a leader across Canada. And I'm really proud of the Premier for driving that home so well. Prab, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, you're on mute.
Whoops. Sorry about that. No, 100%. I want to add on to that. I think that is going to be one of the opportunities, and it kind of really highlighted from Ontario, Canada's perspective, how vulnerable our supply chains are in Ontario. When we needed the critical supply of whether it was PPE or elements to contribute to making PPE, we had to rely on foreign countries that weren't willing to play or were willing to support the province. And thank God we had Premier Ford, who took a principled stand on that and stood up and made Ontario's case, so whether it was our friends south of the border. But it ended up winning. But from that was a lesson for us, a very, I would say, important lesson, and that's going to probably define the next, I would say, strategy around manufacturing in Ontario. This gives us an opportunity to look at where the vulnerabilities are within our supply chains and say, never again will we have this unfortunate opportunity where we're going to have to rely on others for critical infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure inside of our province. And now we've got to look towards that domestic production of that. Whereas previously we were relying on a very globalized, we're all for free trade, but when we have such a critical aspects of the supply chain that we don't have here in Ontario, those are opportunities. And that's how we create more jobs, whether it's in rural Ontario or whether it's in other jurisdictions across this province. But that's going to be our competitive advantage when we come forward, is building up more of that manufacturing and building up more of that supply chain right here in Ontario.
Yeah, if I may, I'm sorry, Paulette, but Prab, the spot on. And you reminded me of a call I was on earlier this morning. And it's my understanding that the president south of the border has said that they're no longer going to sell a key element in sanitizer outside of the United States. And that key element is ethanol. And so of course, my mind just jumps right to task. And I said, my goodness, we have ethanol plants in Ontario, and grain farmers are looking to maintain or not, if not grow, that ethanol market. And so I dug into it a bit further, and the CEO of Grain Farmers of Ontario is a good Bruce County boy from Ripley. And so I called Crosby up right away, and he actually said that ethanol for sanitizer is produced out of Chatham, Kent, and they sell it into the States. So there's so many opportunities for us to say, hey, you know what, we're going to punch up above our weight here, and we're going to claim some of this back again. Prab, you were spot on with those comments. And this morning I just had that perfect example. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's great, because some of our participants did have notes to that, similarly touching on it, about diversifying our economy in rural Ontario for sure was a big one. Rural internet has come up again and again, and I have a question here from one of our local farms whose one of her main concerns is rural internet, and that may be why she's not able to be on this call here even today. She's emailed us to saying trying to do business in a new way is very, very challenging without internet. Also, farmers markets are an important part of the local food chain, and it's been very frustrating to get them going. They are typically classified as special events and not essential services like grocery stores. Please help farmers with this. Lastly, farming, she says, the funding available to farmers doesn't always qualify if it's a one-man operation. The last thing farmers need is another loan. Nothing has changed for them operationally except for being busier and having to adapt to a new electronic way of business. Any comments on that from either of you?
Well, certainly, from opposition days to now in government, we know that rural connectivity along that last mile, that last concession is paramount. And we have a premier and government that's absolutely committed to making sure that connectivity is going to be a reality for all of us. For goodness sakes, I'm very careful right now, because if I was to do a 180 right now, I'm on my phone, I would probably drop the call because of my connectivity issues here at Ambleside. That's Bruce Road 12. And so that said, we are very mindful of that. And we fully recognize, and Prab, I know you can jump all over this. The farming community across Ontario, our agri-food business is a huge player in driving the GDP in this province in terms of our economic stance. And I know farmers want to be part of the solution and be partners in expanding value-added opportunities and processing. That is top of mind with the touch points that we have with our local leadership on a weekly basis. And we're going to keep moving along those lines as well. I've spoke to the Premier one-on-one, person-to-person about this issue, and I know that his entrepreneurial spirit is percolating in that regard, and all of that is based on the foundational opportunity to be connected and have that infrastructure in place. Prab, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and this is something that's coming up quite a bit when we are speaking with rural communities. And I got to say, from our government's perspective, right off the bat in the first year of government, this was one of the first, I think, big projects that our ministers championed. And it was because of the fact that we had good rural representation that kind of alluded to the challenges. And I don't want to make this very political, but the federal government also put a lot of money towards this project. We haven't seen that flow through to the communities or through the development of that broadband internet and increasing that services. But the provincial government is ready to go right there. We've got the money in place. The Minister of Infrastructure and other ministers are fully aware and ready to work. The federal government has 5 ministers that have some sort of responsibility with broadband internet. I think, now more than ever, this is when we need to get both governments going together, rolling in the same direction on this project. And I know there's full 100% cooperation from the government of Ontario on this. And I think, even kind of going back to our question before of how do we build those competitive advantages for businesses online in these small communities is by making sure that we have strong, reliable internet first, and then giving them access to international markets after that. So I'm completely in line with what Minister Thompson has just stated there. And I know she's been a tireless advocate for broadband, along with many of our other ministers as well. And this is something that the Premier himself has repeatedly spoken about. So we want to see this as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That said, I do know that both Bell and Rogers have been in Bruce County working on their towers, doing their bit, what they can right now. But again, we have to have all players at the table in order to make this go forward. Thanks for sharing that, Prab.
Unfortunately, we're running short on time unless anybody wants.
Could I just
Please
add
do.
one perspective? Minister Thompson, when we planned this, I had indicated to you how concerned some of the merchants were down on the main street when they compare their businesses. We mentioned Amazon, for example. And I think the government's done a great job of managing the whole crisis and opening things up. One gap I see in looking at some of the emails we've gotten today. There are some people that will be in phase 3 that they don't have any revenue right now in their businesses, and they're reaching out to us and asking what can they do to survive. If the hairstylists, or I'm thinking of yesterday we have one overnight camp in Brockton. They won't get any revenue this year. So who could these people go to get some assistance and guidance on where to go next?
Okay, certainly they're more than welcome to reach out to my office anytime, and we can work together. But this is you have a wonderful opportunity right now to share those concerns, and email my office, or Chris, if you could forward those emails on to me as well. I'm sorry, Mayor, Your Worship, if you could forward those emails on to me right away, because we have another jobs and recovery meeting on Friday. But I'm very mindful, like thinking about restaurants. In my subcommittees, my sub-advisory committee, I'm very mindful of the fact that restaurants possibly lost food and supplies when they had to close down, and they haven't had any revenue coming in over the last number of weeks, a couple of months, let's be real. And there will be startup costs again to replenish their fridges and their freezers, and that's not lost on me, and it's something that we need to be considering from a recovery perspective as well. But certainly, feel free to reach out to us. When I say us, I mean Prab, our entire government, and I really think actually we need to be considering a separate portal, Prab. I'm thinking out loud here, so remind me I said this. I think we need a separate portal to support businesses starting up again. Just not from a B2B perspective, but from an economic development perspective. How can, where do I go to start the engines again, so to speak? What do you think about that, Prab?
No, that's I think a great idea around that. Just how do we kind of play with making sure that all these businesses that haven't been operational, how can we get them up again? And so if there's a centralized way to do that, I think that's a great opportunity for us to look into that and see how we can do that. But just to echo your comments there, this is definitely something that we can take back to the Jobs and Recovery Committee about the businesses in phase 3 that still have no revenue, and maybe some of the government programs that have been offered wouldn't be able to kind of support them through the entirety of this pandemic. So I think that's very valuable information for us to have.
Yes, so just to close off on that one, Mayor Peabody or Paulette, if you can make sure we get the questions and the emails that came in through our time together today, Prab and I will very readily share them with our committee colleagues and give it all the attention it deserves.
Okay, thank you very much.
We will definitely do that. And I wanted to tell all of the participants, thank you all for participating and bearing with us from the slow start, but we will be sending out a questionnaire to all of you. And if you could kindly answer it, there are some questions that I know Minister Thompson and Minister Sarkaria will be wanting to send back to the panel. So we will be asking those questions, and anything else that's come out of the panel, please let us know. Everything will be passed on. We really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. There were more questions, but we will send them to you because our time is ending at this point.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Prab, for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I consider Prab one of the pillars of our caucus. And if he stood up right now, you'd fully understand what I was meaning. There's a reason why he's a basketball fan. But in all seriousness, he is absolutely the right guy at the right time. carrying the responsibility for small business for Ontario. He is thoughtful, he is thorough, and he is going to make a difference in terms of helping all of us recover, be it small town or urban. And I really appreciate his time today. Prab, do you have any closing comments?
Well, thank you very much, Minister Thompson, for those very kind words. I frequently ask Minister Thompson for a lot of advice, and she's a seasoned, I would say, veteran when it comes to ensuring that she advocates for her community. And I've got to say, she's been an absolute champion. And I always see how great of a job she does representing the interests of not just her community, but rural Ontario, and making sure that you have a voice at the table at Queen's Park. And so we have a great opportunity to work with Minister Thompson on a lot of what we've been able to do. And I want to assure you that, our committees and all the work that goes into it, feedback like we've heard, the questions that, were posed today are very critical to the economic recovery of this province. And we want to keep those lines of communication open. So, don't hesitate to reach out to our offices again to feed into these decision-making processes, because that is now more than ever, it's very critical for us to have these mechanisms in place. And so I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity and thankful for the invitation to have this discussion, because it only helps with forming future policies and making sure they take into consideration communities across the province and specific regions across the province. And that's how we're going to get through this together. So I really appreciate the opportunity and for all of your leadership in the communities that are represented here.
Thank you. Any closing comments, Mayor Peabody or Randy?
Yes, I would certainly like to reemphasize my thanks to our two members of cabinet, and also on behalf of the municipality of Brockton and our council, our thanks to the Premier for all his hard work day in, day out. He stands up there in front of the cameras, takes the tough questions, and I really feel for him. But he hangs in there, and he's been a great ambassador for the province. So be sure to thank the Premier for all the cabinet hard work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Very much. So, Fiona?
Thank you, everybody. I've just popped in here at the end to end the meeting for all. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm sure many of the residents in the municipality of Brockton are very thankful. And I hope everyone has a great day.
All right.
Have a good day.
You.
Thank you for everything.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.